Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the Group of 5 championship. Some really great games. Obviously, a lot of attention on James Madison, a lot of attention on North Texas at Tulane. We'll see how those will impact the CFP, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But we got to talk about just leading up to the CFP rankings. It feels like there's a lot of things to figure out, a lot of things to contemplate as we head towards this or this penultimate rankings for the CFP. And we got to talk about the teams kind of sitting around the bubble and the teams that will be up for debate as we go through the next 8 days, or really the next 4 days. Now that I think about it, it's going to get very crazy here pretty quickly. But let's start with Notre Dame Miami because that's the most popular one. I've been relatively clear about this one from at least over the last couple of weeks. I believe Notre Dame to be the better football team right this second. I think Notre Dame has done a ton to kind of prove that they are a much better team than they were when they played Miami. I think Miami has done some of the opposite. Now, Miami has closed the season incredibly well. I think Miami deserves a lot of respect, and I've also said I don't think you can put Notre Dame in and leave Miami out. I just really don't think that can happen unless you want a lot of teams to not play Notre Dame moving forward or not play these out-of-conference games in general moving forward. That'll be a common theme. We'll talk about that here in a second. But at the end of the day, these two things, I don't think too much will change tonight. I really do think Notre Dame will be above Miami. I don't know if Miami will move all that much. Maybe they'll move just a little bit up. I think it'll come down to the conference title games, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Just how do they view that? How do they view BYU if they lose? How do they view Alabama if they lose? That's a big time question mark. I think that's what this is going to come down to. If you have to if you point a gun to my head and made me pick, or not made me pick, but made me guess what the CFP committee is going to do, I think they're going to put Notre Dame in and leave Miami out. I think at the end of all of this, and we'll talk about this more later, but I really do think that's what's going to happen. I think that'd be a really bad decision. But I do think that's what's going to happen, and we're just going to have to live with the consequences of that. But again, we'll see it. We'll talk about that here in a second, and we'll see what they do tonight and moving forward. For BYU, this is a tough one. Where they're ranked tonight is massive, because the reality is if you're ranked around 11 or 10 or really anywhere outside of the bracket, you're not getting in with a loss. I can tell you that much. So you got to find a way to be somewhere in that bracket tonight. If you're not, I don't think you're in. I hate to say it. And if you win this weekend, it's all null and void. I think you and Texas Tech are in. Who does that knock out? That's a question that we can answer here in a second. But at the end of the day, this is a huge night for BYU fans. You have to find a way to be in those ranking or be in that bracket tonight. If you're not, you got to pray that they don't love Alabama as much as you would assume they would love Alabama given the past. But at the end of the day, I don't know what's going to happen with BYU. I believe they're probably maybe the second or probably the first most important team when we talk about the playoff rankings tonight. Where are they? Are they in the field? Because if they aren't, then a loss on Saturday is not going to put them in the field. I can promise you that. Alabama Crimson Tide, another massive question mark. If Alabama wins the SEC, it doesn't matter. We all know that Georgia would be in, Alabama would be in. If they lose, are they in danger of falling out? I don't think they will, and I don't think they should. I'll be plainly clear about this. The same take I have about BYU, actually. If they're in the rankings tonight, I think they should stay there. But at the end of the day, did they have a bad loss? Absolutely. But they've done more than enough to prove that they are one of those teams that deserves a shot to compete for a national title. They've played really tough games. They lost an Oklahoma game where, yes, they did not play great football. I think Oklahoma's defense has proven more than enough that 21 points against them is pretty darn impressive at the end of the day. That's not trying to totally discount that loss. It's just to say this Alabama team has done plenty, in my mind, to, I don't want to say erase the Florida State loss, but at least it not drag them down far enough to where if they lose an SEC title game on Saturday, that they're out of the CFP. I think they're safe. I think they're okay, but if they leave them out, if they lose that game, barring them getting beat by 30 points, if they leave them out, I'll be incredibly mad. And I think a lot of other people will, and it's not the people you want to be mad if you're the CFP committee. But we'll talk about that if and when it does happen. Vanderbilt. This is a really good team. It's a fantastic football team. They've done incredible things. I think Diego Pavia has a great argument for the Heisman, something that we'll talk about next week, I promise you. But at the end of the day, there's just not enough room. And they really don't have a great argument to find their way into this thing. They've done an incredible job. And a 10-2 SEC team, you wouldn't imagine that they would never be in. But losing to Bama, losing to Texas is a very, very hard path for you to slide up in those rankings. It's just kind of the way it is. Some people are saying it's a logo thing. Some people are saying if it was an Alabama logo or a Texas logo, they'd be in the top 12. I don't buy that. I really don't. Your best win is a Tennessee team that's probably going to be ranked around 23. I just don't buy that. I think it's a good team. I think they've done incredible things this year, and I think they deserve a ton of respect. But you lost to the two teams that they're debating about right around the bubble as well. There's no way you're going to find your way through the wilderness there. It's not to say this team wasn't incredible this year. It's not to say that most years this team wouldn't be in, because they would. It's just one of those years where it's way too crowded and someone was going to be on the outside looking in. I think it's going to be Vanderbilt. Those two losses to Bama and Texas are just way too much to overcome. Ole Miss, they're in. I really don't see a debate here. Now, look, I do want to say this prior, because there's going to be Florida State fans that get upset if I say there's no question they have to be in no matter what. I think losing Lane Kiffin and losing the offensive staff, pretty much the entire offensive staff, is more impactful to what Ole Miss is going to be than losing Jordan Travis was to Florida State. I really do believe that. I don't think it's going to look all that pretty. When Ole Miss eventually does play in the playoff, I can't say that confidently. So this is all a guess from me, that I think it's not going to look all that great. I think they're going to look a little bit out of sync. I don't think it's going to be perfect, and I think that offense is going to probably not play all that well in their CFP matchup. I can't prove that. If they were playing this weekend in the SEC title, then I think it's way more up in the air, and I think that would be relatively fair for it to be up in the air. I can't say confidently how much of a different team they are, so the CFP committee can't either. I think they have to be in the field. If you want to knock them out of a home playoff game, I guess you could. I don't think you should. I think this team has proved plenty enough to get the shot that they deserve, and then you just let the chips fall where they may. It's a very weird situation. It's obviously not ideal for Ole Miss. I don't think it'll work out all that beautifully for Ole Miss in the CFP, but you can't punish them for something that you're not absolutely certain of, and I think you have to keep them in the field because of that. And finally, the team that is pissing off as many people as they possibly can right this second, Steve Sarkisian, on really an all-time politics run right about now, because no one has done it better than him right now. It's been incredible to watch him go to work about this CFP rankings, and he's got some good arguments. There's no doubt about that. I've said this before. I do not believe Texas should be in. I've watched just about every snap of that football team. I don't think they're a playoff football team. They haven't played that way the vast majority of the year. They have some incredible wins. They also have some games where it's just questionable if that team even deserves to play in the SEC. It was terrible football at times for Texas. There's a few things that I've found about this argument that I found a little bit silly. It's not to say that Texas should be in the field. It's not to make arguments for Texas one way or the other. It's just parts of this argument and parts of every argument around the CFP that I've just found incredibly silly, that have been put on display with this one. The number one thing, can we stop starting CFP debates with losses? It's not to say that they don't matter. It's not to say they shouldn't be talked about. And the Florida loss for Texas absolutely should be talked about. The Georgia 25-point loss has to be a part of this discussion, as does the Ohio State loss early on in the season. Period. End of story. The idea that every discussion that I've seen online talking about the CFP and talking about these bubble teams and who should be in and who should be out always starts with who has the better losses. It is the craziest thing in the world to me that in a world where Texas beats Florida by, let's say, 10, but then loses to Oklahoma is somehow a better resume. That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand why a terrible win is way more important than a terrible loss is way more important than a fantastic win. I don't get it. I've never understood it. It's the biggest thing I have a problem with when we talk about the CFP discussions and we get into the bubble and we try to decide which team deserves to be in, which team doesn't. why are we starting with the losses? Why aren't we starting with the wins? Why aren't we starting with the incredible things the team has done and not only starting with the terrible things teams have done? I don't get it. It's a goofy thing that we do. Again, it doesn't mean that losses shouldn't be involved in the discussion. It's just to say it feels ridiculous when we're talking about Notre Dame against Texas, and the argument for Notre Dame is because they lost to Miami and A&M. Bizarre to me that we are doing that. But at the end of the day, that's just a little side note. That's not necessarily specifically about Texas. That's just an overarching thing on all of that. Number two, they are being punished for losing to Ohio State. We can talk about the Florida loss. That absolutely is punishing them more. There's no doubt about that. They are being punished for losing to Ohio State. To me, there is no question that if they played, let's say, Rice on that first weekend instead of Ohio State, Texas would be slotted right above Oklahoma right now. Some people would argue that it would be the Miami-Notre Dame factor. I think a 17-point neutral site win does way more than a 3-point home win. That's just me. I definitely think, and I also don't think Oklahoma's proved beyond a reasonable doubt that they're infinitely better than Texas right now, the way Notre Dame did, at least for a little bit against Miami. Texas would be in if they played Rice in the first week. That's why Sark is talking about canceling those games, plain and simple. And I don't blame him. I really don't. It's not to say that I want him to cancel those games. It's not to say that I think it's a great idea in some cases to cancel those games. I heard Brooks Austin talking about this and just saying, you're Texas. You should want to play everyone tough. You should want to be the team that teams go through, not the team that shies away from a challenge just to get a better shot at the CFP. And I understand that. I'm fully with you. And I do think that is a real reality here. The other part of that is, as a coach, as a program right now, you're defined by if you get to the college football playoff. You're defined how many national championships you win. If a game against Ohio State is going to be a reason that you're not in the college football playoff, why play the game against Ohio State? Now, I want Texas to play Ohio State next year, play Michigan the year after that, and play Notre Dame the year after that, as they are slated to do. But they are being punished for losing to Ohio State. There's really not an argument against that unless you believe that a 17-point neutral site win over Oklahoma holds the same weight as a 3-point home win Miami over Notre Dame. I don't. So they are being punished for that. There's no argument that they aren't being punished for that. They're being punished more for the Florida loss, more for the Georgia loss, but they are being punished for going on the road and playing a team that has been proven to be far and away the best football team in the entire country. Again, that's not saying Texas should be in. It's just saying that they are being punished for playing Ohio State and losing by 7 points. Plain and simple. Finally, the idea that I've seen pretty much everyone that's making this debate, pretty much everyone that is arguing against Texas, goes back to the same line that I think is the most ridiculous thing when we are talking about college football. They say, no team with 3 wins should ever make the college football playoff. That is the single dumbest thing that has ever been said. And I don't mean this to say, like, every 3-loss team should be in. The only thing that should matter is strength of schedule. If you play a tough schedule, congratulations. You can lose 4 games and absolutely be in. This Texas team should not be in. But applying a very firm rule to a subjective group of people in a subjective sport is uniquely stupid, and it would totally cut out the desire to find the right national champion. Let's say Texas played Ohio State, Indiana, and Texas A&M and lost those 3 games, but won the rest of their games against Georgia and Alabama and LSU and a ton of other big-time teams. You're telling me that team doesn't deserve a chance to compete for a national title? You're telling me that team, because they got a 3 in the loss column, just has no right to be in the CFP? Obviously, this is not that case in this Texas team, but the idea that I've seen way too many people say, no matter what, in any circumstance, a team with 3 losses can't make the CFP, that's ridiculous. There's tons of teams that have 3 losses that could very well make the CFP and very well be deserving of making the CFP moving forward, especially with the SEC moving to 9 games next year. That's something y'all are going to have to get out of your head, because that is going to happen at some point, and it's not going to be a crazy conspiracy. It's not going to be SEC bias. It's going to be the right thing to do. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do here. They don't deserve to be in, does the Texas Longhorns, but it doesn't make any sense to say that under no circumstance should a team that lost 3 games be in if that team plays a remarkably tough schedule comparative to everyone else. That's just a uniquely dumb way to look at it. Overall, for the Texas Longhorns, it's not a playoff team. I'm not going to talk your ear off. I'm not going to try to give you the Steve Sarkisian pitch. It's not a playoff team. They played very poorly in a number of games throughout this season. They do not deserve to be in this CFP. I am not going to get mad at Texas. I am not going to yell at Steve Sarkisian. I'm not going to be up in arms if they cancel that Ohio State game next year and they schedule Purdue and they schedule someone that's a little bit easier, that's a little bit more of a layup. I don't think they'll do that. I think they're going to keep the games. I want them to keep the games. I think it's plenty beneficial to Texas to keep the games. But the reality of the matter is, if you are laying the line that we just talked about, that 3 losses and you're out, why would I play Ohio State? Why wouldn't I play a team where I could get healthy, continue to develop my football team, and then go into the conference schedule with as many losses to play around with as possible? I wouldn't blame them if they were to cancel these out-of-conference games. I hope they don't. Part of me thinks they shouldn't, but that's more of a mental aspect of this, not necessarily a practical aspect of making the CFP, which is the ultimate goal for every program and every team and the measuring stick for every team. And as I talked about earlier, Texas will be in if they didn't play Ohio State in week 1. You can disagree with that if you want to. I just firmly don't agree with you. But at the end of the day, more than happy to have some discussions in the comments. Don't necessarily want to, go to bat for Texas in any way in this moment. But I do want to say that Ohio State game is I don't want to say the thing keeping them out. It is affecting them not being in the CFP, and I think without that game, they would be in the CFP. I'll leave it there for the time being. It's not a playoff team. That's about it for the Texas Longhorns. I think that will be proven when the rankings come out tonight. Moving forward to the G5, what's the order of the G5 teams tonight? What's the order as we head into this final weekend? Is JMU above North Texas? Is North Texas above JMU? Or either of them ranked? Or are they trying to keep this a little bit ambiguous where they sit comparative to Duke? I think all 3 should be ranked. I think Tulane should probably be ranked number 1. I think it should be JMU right behind them, and then North Texas right behind JMU. That's the way that I would do it. But at the end of the day, if North Texas and JMU are not ranked tonight, then I think there's an opening for Duke. I think if both of them are ranked, then it's going to be a little bit tougher for Duke to find a way into that CFP. It's not to say it's impossible, but a win over the number 18 team in the country, does that bump you over a team that maybe got a dominating win for JMU or for Tulane or North Texas, got a ranked win on their schedule? We'll see. If one of those teams is ranked, just Tulane, you might have a little bit of an issue. If all 3 of those teams are ranked and it's JMU above North Texas, does JMU go with a big win? If North Texas also wins, does North Texas jump over them? All of that is on the table and will be debated in that room, but where they're ranked coming up on this weekend is going to be huge. If North Texas is above a JMU, then maybe JMU is fully out of this thing regardless of what happens, unless maybe Duke gets a big-time win. But again, the order of these teams is going to be massive. I think all 3 will be ranked, but we'll see if all 3 end up being ranked. And as we're talking about G5 teams, I might as well give my quick take on the G5 spot. It's very simple, I'll be totally honest. Now, I'm a proponent of the G5 playoff because I think it would be incredible to watch. I would really enjoy watching it. I also understand it's a relatively slippery slope. Not a lot of people watch the FCS playoffs. There's a very real world where that happens to the G5 playoff, and I don't want that to happen to these G5 schools. My plain take on whether or not the G5 should be in the CFP. Once they went past 6 to 8 teams, you were going to have every team that could win a title and every team that really genuinely deserved a shot to win a title in there. It was not going to be a question. It wasn't going to be a big deal. Once you went past 6 teams, you had everything that you needed to have. Giving a spot to a team like JMU or a team like Tulane or a team like North Texas doesn't seem like the worst thing in the world to me. I'll be totally honest. I'd love a G5 playoff, but I understand the slippery slope there. I understand the dangers of putting them off and kind of on their own island. they could kind of fall off into C. There's no doubt about that. That is a very, very dangerous proposition. So I'm good with it. I really don't have a massive problem, plainly because all the teams that we're arguing over in the bubble, the vast majority of them don't have a chance to win the national title and don't deserve a shot to go for it. So once you went past 6 to 8 teams, I think we're all good. I think one of those spots going to a G5 team is by far not even in the top 10 of the problems with the CFP right now. So I don't really have an issue with it. I don't. I know a lot of people do, and I wouldn't hate to see a G5 playoff break off from this thing and make this thing a little bit more interesting. But again, I don't think you're going to get them to agree to that, and I really don't think it's a massive deal to watch JMU get beat by 30, especially because I watched Tennessee get beat by 30 last season. Finally, my view on the CFP heading into this weekend, heading into the rankings that are coming out here pretty soon. To me, it's over. And I know that sounds really lame going into conference championship week. To me, it's about seeding in the ACC versus Group of 5 drama. That's about it for this weekend. There are 8 teams that I would argue are in, plain and simple, firmly in this field. Ohio State, Indiana, Georgia, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, and Oregon. I think those teams are firmly in. Some people are debating Oklahoma recently. I tend to believe they're pretty firmly in. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're debating them right now in that room. I think they're in. I don't think there's much of a question there. I think the win over Alabama does plenty for them to be in the field. I guess we'll see if that changes, but I think those 8 teams are pretty firmly in this field, no problem. 2 teams have to be in, additionally to those 8 teams. The Group of 5 representative or representatives, depending on what happens in the ACC championship, or the ACC champ if it's Virginia, if it's Duke, maybe if it's Duke. So that's the question there. Do we have 2 Group of 5 teams? Do we have 1 Group of 5 and 1 ACC champ? Who is that ACC champ is the only question there, but 2 teams need to make it in from that grouping. Then there's 2 spots, and there are 6 teams here, 6 teams that are in debate for those spots, if you will. Bama, BYU, Notre Dame, Miami, Vanderbilt, and Texas. It's Bama and BYU. Period. End of story. I really don't have much of a problem saying that. Now, if they lose by 35, if they lose by 40, if they look ridiculous, if a big-time injury happens, there's obviously caveats to this. If there's big-time changes on Saturday, then yes, my take on this could change, and I'll let you know that on Monday. I promise you that, and I will wear that. But at the end of the day, if these teams compete the way that I expect them to, if Alabama loses by 3 to Georgia, if BYU loses by 11 to Texas Tech, but plays a better game than they did last time, they're in. They're teams that have earned the right to play for power conference championships, and if we're going to sit there and say, nah, you're just not quite good enough, you might as well do away with them. And I think we're going to do that at some point anyway when we expand this thing inevitably again, and I have a whole rant about that when the season's over. Just wanted to worry about the football at this very moment. But at the end of the day, to me, it's Bama and BYU. I think these teams have earned the right to be in the CFP, to earn the right to compete for a national title. I think an 11-1 BYU team not being in the field already is a little ridiculous, and especially if they're playing for a conference championship and have only lost to one team that we're going to deem a top 4 team in the country. I think they should be in. Now, I do think there's a debate there. I get the debate. I've talked about it before. You have to decide, is there an 11-point difference between the number 4 and the number 10 or 11 team in the country? I get that. I totally understand that. But at the end of the day, this is a team that has battled so many different things throughout this year, lost their quarterback about a month before the season, had to start a true freshman, and they found a way to get to 11-1 into Arlington. They should be in. I really don't have a debate for that unless Texas Tech just blows the doors off them and absolutely tears them apart, and that's about it. I think they're in good shape. I think they should be in, and I think Bama should be in almost regardless. If they get rolled, then maybe we're having a conversation. But as of right now, I don't expect that to happen. I think BYU, I think Bama should be in. I think Notre Dame should be out. I think Miami should be out. I think Notre Dame, their best argument is 2 losses that they took early in the season. That's crazy to me. Miami, you had the world at your feet, and you lost as double-digit favorites in back-to-back games to SMU and Louisville. I'm not going to sit here and try to get you in the playoff. I just really am not. So I think it's Bama and BYU. I really think there's no question to me. I respect I respect Notre Dame, respect Miami. They've done incredible things this year. I think it's Bama and BYU. I don't think there's any question about that. Obviously, there's caveats to that, and we can talk about that on Monday. But as of right this second, it's Bama and BYU as long as they play competitive matchups on Saturday. Now that I've said what I think, or what I want to happen, or what I would do, that's not what I think is going to happen. I want that to happen badly. That's exactly what I would do if I was in the shoes of the committee. I don't think that's going to happen. I think BYU, if they lose by 10 plus points, I think BYU is going to get left out in favor of Notre Dame. I think Bama, if they lose by 10 plus or something, I think they could get left out. I think there's a path for Miami and Notre Dame to get in. Frankly, I think it's probably one pair or the other pair, if I'm being totally honest, because I don't think you can put Notre Dame in without putting Miami in. So I don't know what you do. If BYU and Bama win, that'd make this a whole lot easier. It would definitely just lock up all those 12 positions. If they lose, I still think those teams deserve to be in. I don't think Notre Dame or Miami deserve to be in. It's just one of those things. I go back and forth on this quite a bit. I have throughout this season. People will be mad. I don't think all that's going to happen. All the things that I want to happen, all the things that I just talked about with Bama and BYU, I think it's going to end up being Bama and Notre Dame. I think Bama's going to lose or win that game. I think they will be in. I think BYU is going to narrowly lose their game. I think they'll be out for Notre Dame, and you'll let the anger flow. I think Miami will have a very good gripe to be angry. I think BYU will have a great gripe. I think they're going to do the wrong thing, is essentially the long and short of that. I don't think they're going to make the right decision. At the end of this thing, if it was me, it'd be very likely that I'd pick BYU and Bama, barring some crazy change on Saturday, and that could happen. So we'll see what happens in that one. That's my overall take on the CFP as we head into this final weekend. I think it's pretty much over. I think we're just playing for seeding. I don't think the committee sees it that way, and that's rather unfortunate. But at the end of the day, thank you so much for tuning in to this edition, or just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. Please do like, subscribe, comment. It means the absolute world to me. We got a big week. We got another show coming up tomorrow. We got to do a couple of wrap-ups things. We got to do some best bets. We got to talk about the CFP rankings coming out in a couple of hours. We got to get into a number of things before we get out here for the weekend, because going to Washington, D.C. this weekend, we'll be out for the entire weekend. We'll be back on Monday. Promise you that, to break down everything. But wanted to make sure I got everything out of the way. We got all of our picks for the upcoming weekend out of the way. We got some big-time CFP takes out of the way. But at the end of the day, we'll be back tomorrow to talk about the CFP rankings, to draw some conclusions about who's still on the bubble, who's officially off the bubble, all of that good stuff. We'll talk about it all, do some best bets, and all of that stuff tomorrow, so definitely be on the lookout for that. But thank you so much for tuning into this edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. Please do like, subscribe, comment. It means the world to me, helps me out a ton. But thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.